Wow. Well, thanks so much, Rachel, for leading us in worship, and Daniel for hosting and for praying with us and for us. And thank you. Thank you for letting us into your home, and welcome to my home. I got to say, it's a bit strange for me. I've never been in my home, in my living room on a Sunday morning, but here we are together, and I'm excited for the journey. It's been a crazy week. Not only is our province in a state of emergency, our city's now in a state of emergency. There's just so much going on, trying to find our bearings in all of this. And I was telling my wife, I'm trying to find the silver lining in all this. And I think I finally found it. And I announced it to her. I said, babe, here's the great news of what this all means. This is the year that we will finally achieve lawn perfection. This is the first year that we're finally going to have enough time to give it exactly what it needs. All the love and care that our lawn so desperately wants and needs, it's going to get this year. And that's a really significant thing for us, because early on in our marriage, we had this really traumatic experience where we had this home and it needed lots of renovations. So we spent all our time renovating the inside, that the outside looked horrible. And I had this one neighbor, this older Italian gentleman who, Al, a good friend of ours, but he would always chirp me from his porch. He'd be like, hey, I hear the state of your lawn is reflective of the state of your marriage. And I'm like, ah! So this is the first year we're going to heal from that experience. And so I'm super excited about that. But in all seriousness, you didn't tune in today to hear about my lawn. The reality is you want to be connected to your church family. And so Lakeside, I'm so glad that through technology and through the incredible team that we have, we're able to still electronically, in a way, gather together. And we've been on this journey, a journey that we began before we knew about this outbreak and the implications it would have on our church. And as we continue forward, we just continue to realize how much providence God had in us picking this series. And we don't credit ourselves for this, but it's just every week feels like, wow, this is the topic, and these are the themes that we need to be dialoguing through and wrestling through as a church community in this time. And so if you're just jumping into this series, can I just give you a quick summary? The series is called Unclaimed, and it's all about exploring the things in life that Jesus had in his lifestyle that often as Jesus followers, we don't take hold of. As Jesus followers, we love to take hold of the morals of Jesus, the truths of Jesus. But one of the metaphors that Jesus gave about himself is that he's the way, not just the truth and the life. He's the way, that he has a lifestyle way that we're meant to emulate, to model, to live by. And many of us actually just added Jesus into the midst of our own lifestyle, and we're actually missing out on the gift and blessing of Jesus's lifestyle. And so week one, we just said, you have to let go of something to take hold of something. You can't just add Jesus dust into your already existing lifestyle and expect it to all be better. In fact, you actually need to let go of something. Jesus' disciples had to continually let go of things. They were leaving their life behind, leaving their work behind, leaving their family behind to be able to take hold of the new way that Jesus was bringing. And in the same way, the first week, we just did just that. We asked that question, what are the things we need to leave behind to take hold of the Jesus life? Week two, we talked about noise and how we're constantly surrounded by audio and visual noise. And in fact, we have a noise machine in our pocket that is a never-ending portal to exploration and entertainment. And yet, Jesus was constantly leaving the busyness of his life and the demands on his time and going out to the desert and being reflective and praying and coming back totally clear of what God was calling him to do. And so in that sense, it was so important for us to realize that we are called to be reflective. And we summarize that as, in order to be effective, you have to be reflective. You need those desert moments. And last week, Robin just killed it talking about Sabbath. And I loved it. I was actually there in person. Some of you were kind of watching online and you're like, why do I hear laughter? I thought nobody was at church. Well, I was hosting, so I was there with some of our staff team that were making sure everything worked out okay. But it was just incredible to be there and to be listening and to learning so much about Sabbath as an oasis and the idea of micro Sabbaths and letting them bleed into every part of our day. I just loved it. If you missed it, so timely for this season, Robin's message on Sabbath. And then this week, we're going to talk about another part of the lifestyle of Jesus that we can take hold of, especially in this time, and it's the idea of simplicity. And many of you are actually feeling, as we were starting this series, like, this is great. I'd love to explore some of this stuff, but I just don't have time. And I know I should have time, but I don't have time. And then you enter COVID-19 and all of a sudden you have time. And so some of you, this has almost been like a breath of fresh air. You've seen this as a gift where you're naturally simplifying your life, able to be reflective, to be more effective, able to Sabbath. You're like ready for this week's challenge. Like, what is it? You're having a quiet time all of a sudden because you don't have a commute anymore. You're working from home. All of a sudden you have time. You're practicing Sabbath. You're like finishing work and your house chores are done because when your boss calls, you just put the headphones in and you're folding laundry and you're doing dishes. And so it's like, you're just like so much more on top of life right now and it's feeling great. And then there's others of you and you're feeling like this is the worst. Like I have not felt more distant from God than I do right now. Like I'm just so overwhelmed. My mind is racing. My anxiety is rising. I can't focus. I can't rest at night. I toss and turn. I've lost such critical things to my life, relationships. I've lost health. My health is now suffering. I've lost a job, or I'm scared I'm going to lose my job. And so the anxiety of the future is crushing you and you can't seem to get your heart rate down. It's just like constantly bubbling over in a sense. And you just kind of picture your pastor sitting in his rocking chair going, in order to be effective, you got to be reflective. And you're just like, bah! We don't get paid to read our Bible. It would be nice if we did, but we don't. We have to deal with real life. So how's this going to work out? And can I just say, wherever you're at today, whether you're feeling the newness of life in this season or you're feeling totally overwhelmed, the words that we began this series from Jesus with are so timely. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. I love that. Because some of you are wrestling. I talk to people and they're like, I just feel so guilty going to Jesus when I'm in need. And I'm like, listen, I get that because as humans, we don't love it when people only call us when we're in need, when they're in need. But Jesus actually invites that. He's like, are you tired? Are you burdened? Are you done with trying to do it on your own? Come. And so can we just pause? Wherever you're at today, just breathe for a second and accept that invitation. And we're going to just pray. Jesus, we're tired. We're burdened. We got a million things on our mind and we just want to pause and we want to engage with you. Thank you for your spirit. Thank you that we don't have to go anywhere or do anything to find your presence. To just be still, we become aware that you're with us. So for the next 30 minutes, we just give you everything that we're carrying. We lay it at your feet. We trust you with it. And we want to hear from you. Spirit of God, speak to us today. Amen. Well, as we jump into today's message, there's this verse that I read this week that I thought was so timely to kick us off. And it's Luke chapter 12, verse 15. And it comes up, these two brothers are having an argument and they figure Jesus can solve it. And so one brother says, Jesus, can you tell my brother to give me my half of the inheritance? They're having financial trouble. And Jesus doesn't say, hey, knock it off. Stop that. Give him his money. This is what Jesus says, Luke 12:15. Then he said to them, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. It's like, I don't even know if Jesus solved the problem. I don't know if he knock it off, give it back to him. That's his, and this is how we're going to split it up. And that's that. I said so. You want to really, right? I don't know that Jesus did that, but I know the first thing Jesus did was he's like, guys, careful, because you're fighting over money. But I just want you to know, life does not consist of an abundance of possessions. And this would be the one of many warnings that Jesus would give about money and possessions. Jesus was always talking about money and stuff. And it's interesting because you're, maybe not a church person, maybe not a Christian, and you're like, there it is, another religious person talking about money. But here's the interesting thing. For as much as Jesus talked about money, read the entire Gospels, the entire life stories of Jesus, you will never find one instance of Jesus asking people for money. What you will find is a theme where Jesus is constantly warning people of the dangers of greed, the dangers of money, the dangers of possessions, and how they have an ability to actually grip you. And Jesus was not trying to get money from you. He was trying to free you from its grip. And that's one of the things we're going to discover today, the unclaimed life that Jesus offers us, a different way to look at our finances and our possessions. And in a lot of ways, it feels really timely because our ability in this season to gain possessions has actually been put on pause. And so in some ways, you can kind of accidentally take a dry run or a test drive or experience the way of Jesus with regards to money and finances because you're kind of already there. And it's an opportunity to actually look at the way we spend money and shop, because we're not spending as much money and shopping as much in this season. So in a sense, it's a way to actually be reflective on our consumeristic culture. And that's really interesting because the way that we use money and possessions is only about 100 years old. If you look at history, 90% of people 100 years ago in North America were farmers. They got their living from the land. Most of them had no use for actual cash because they just traded goods. And in about 100 years, things have shifted to the point where now about 2% of us are in agriculture. And things are totally different. I love what Richard Foster says. He says, we in the West, what a great summary, we in the West are guinea pigs in one huge economic experiment in consumption. We in the West are guinea pigs in one huge economic experiment in consumption. Now, this is probably going to be a gross oversimplification of history. So I apologize to all the history majors out there, but we just got to summarize it. So where did our consumeristic culture come from? It's very simply summarized as the World War. World War I shaped the way consumerism grew from there, because when factories started to develop in North America about 100 years ago to support the war effort, tanks and guns and bullets and all those things were being created. And all of a sudden the war ended and the people who owned the factories needed a way to keep the factories open. And so literally tank factories became t-shirt factories. It was like, we need to keep producing to keep these people to have jobs, to be able to pay them, to be able to on and on and on. And so now 100 years later, we have an industry that is driven by consumerism. And so in a lot of ways, right now, we're given a gift where we get to pause and we get to look back and reflect over the last 200 years or last 100 years and see, what have we gained? What's gotten better, but what also hasn't? And what's actually not so good that maybe we should pause and never go back to, in a sense. And so here's two things that come to mind, maybe bubble to the surface. Maybe you're starting to realize them now as you're kind of home and unable to shop and unable to buy the things that you like to buy. And it's simply this, two challenges that kind of rise to the surface. Number one, enough is a moving target. I love what John D. Rockefeller said. Enough is always just a little bit more than what you have. And in fact, studies that just keep coming out keep showing this. One study I love, literally, it surveyed people who make between $20,000 a year and $200,000 a year. And when those people were asked, how much money would you need to have enough? Every person, whether they made $20,000 a year or $200,000 a year, said about double. That was the average answer that people said. Why? Because enough is a moving target. I love what Greg Easterbrook says. He says, Americans and Europeans in this season have ever more of everything except happiness. That he actually looked at the studies and he says, in the last 50 years, depression rates have gone up 10 times what they were before, or unipolar depression, which is, unremitting bad feelings without a specific cause. Why is that the case? Because enough is a moving target. And we're never satisfied. Number two, the second thing that we're becoming more and more aware of is that things don't just cost money, they cost time. Some of you know this. Let me give you an example, okay? I really, really want a motorcycle, okay? In fact, if you're cleaning your house, you got some time in your hand and you're cleaning your garage and all of a sudden you move some stuff and you find a motorcycle that you're like, oh, I forgot I even had this. Call me. My number is 647. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, I really want a motorcycle. But what I'm aware of is that there's much more than just a financial cost. And I've looked at it. I've even called my insurance agent. And I'm like, hey, now that I live in Guelph, yes, insurance will be cheaper. But I still have to buy the motorcycle and insure it, which means I have to probably get a side job, which means I'm now going to be a bit busier. I'm going to get home a bit later. My kids are going to have less time with me, or I'm going to be a bit more hurried. So all of a sudden, there's now a relational cost on my family. Beyond that, it goes a bit more than that. Now, all of a sudden, I have an extra thing that I have to maintain. I either have to fix it myself or work more to get more money to pay someone else to fix it. I have to clean it. I have to find a place to store it in the winter. And it's probably going to even impact my marriage because my wife's going to be talking to me and I'm going to be distracted on Pinterest looking at leather pants or something. Like, it's going to have more than just the financial cost. There's a time cost associated with it as well. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying whenever you buy something, we're coming aware now that it doesn't just have a price tag of dollar value. It actually has a time allocation that goes with it as well. And so run the cost benefit analysis when we buy things, because things don't just cost us money, they cost us time. And when we have less time, what do? We hurry more. And we talked about this. When you hurry more, it negatively impacts our relationships. And we're relational beings who are made to love God and love people. So then what's the solution? Like, what do we do if we want to follow the Jesus way? Like, we want to take hold of the unclaimed way that Jesus lived. Like, what is it? Like, do we just sell all our nice things? Do we go back to living in shacks and going to the bathroom in a hole in the road or hole in the ground? And do we kind of go fetching our own water? Like, is that the way? Like, Jesus was homeless, so should we be? But the reality is that's kind of a myth. When you look at the life of Jesus, you discover that Jesus wasn't against possessions. He was just cautious that they don't get a grip of your heart. In fact, when you look at the life of Jesus, from the moment he was born, people showed up with really nice things, right? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. There's no verse where Mary looked at the wise men and said, wow, thanks for your generosity, but we really shouldn't have nice things because this Jesus, he's God's son, and that wouldn't look so good. I mean, can you imagine what people would say? Like, maybe you have a gift receipt for these things, right? Like, there's no verse for that. It's like his life started and all of a sudden there were nice things in his possession. Beyond that, Jesus was a carpenter, which means he made a living wage that he could support a family on. Then he became a rabbi. Rabbis had money. They had supporters who were usually wealthy individuals who paid for their travel and their food and their lodging so that they could travel around and teach others. Not only that, as he was in ministry, there was so much money amongst him and his disciples to do their ministry that they actually needed a money manager. Didn't pick the best money manager. Judas wasn't the greatest in the end, but he needed a money manager. And in fact, when you read the life stories of Jesus, he was friends with people who were rich and poor. Multiple occasions, he was having meals with people who seemed to have money. In fact, one time, he was actually, or more than once, accused of being a glutton and a drunkard. You don't get accused of being a glutton and a drunkard by eating rice and beans and flat water. Like, obviously, he was okay engaging with things in the world. And yet his life did not consist or was not run by the possessions that he had. And he warned others of the grip it could have on their life. So then we pause and we simply ask the question, what is the Jesus way? Like, what is this idea and how does he view these things? And what can we learn in this season as we pause and we reflect in the midst of this crisis that we're in? Like, we don't want to waste this time. So what is there that we can learn from this? And so we're actually going to look at a passage in the book of Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 21. If you want to this week, if things that we say today just kind of resonate with you, read the whole section all the way to verse 34. But today we're just going to unpack 3 verses. There's more than enough there for us to wrestle through today. But Matthew 6, it's the Sermon on the Mount. It's one of the most famous talks that Jesus gives. And many people don't know this, but about 25% of the Sermon on the Mount had to do with possessions, wealth, and money. And so we're digging into that right now. So Matthew 6:19, Jesus says this, "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal." Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal. He's like, guys, don't just amass all your possessions and all your wealth on this earth because things expire. Things get old, things break, things run out, and they rust out and they get stolen. So don't just invest in this world. And in fact, beyond that, even if you had enough money to buy really good things that would last forever, you expire. He's like, you're not going to live forever. He's like, so don't store up all your material possessions and wealth in this world. And then he continues on. He says, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust don't destroy and where thieves don't break in and steal. What's Jesus saying? Jesus is saying, invest in things that have an eternal value. That Jesus followers don't just live for this life because we know that there's another life. There's an eternity that follows this. And so to put all our eggs into this world makes absolutely no sense. And then the bottom line, I love this, that Jesus says this, verse 21, he says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I love, like, if you just think that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Jesus is saying, listen, your heart actually follows your money. Which is such an interesting perspective. I love what one author kind of gave another word picture. He said, think of money, according to Jesus, as the steering wheel of your heart. Where you put your treasure is the place where you're going to end up. So make sure you put your treasure where you want to end up. What's the bottom line of what Jesus is saying? He's saying, be intentional with your money and with your possessions. Be intentional with your money and your possessions. And then Jesus, so we'll come back to that, but then Jesus continues on with this strange kind of, people often think like that's a out of nowhere passage that has nothing to do with money, but let's just read it, okay? The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. If your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. Now, people read that and they're like, exactly. So be careful what you look at on the internet because, whatever you let in through your eyes is going to mess up your whole body. Listen, I'm not saying they're wrong. You should guard what you watch, but that's not what the verse is about. Not at all what this verse is about. It's actually a first century idiom, okay? And if you're thinking to yourself, what's an idiom? Don't worry, your pastor had to Google it too, okay? Here's what an idiom is. It's when a saying's meaning cannot be deduced from the meaning of the words in the saying. Now, I feel like I should gain bonus points for using deduced. I think Sherlock Holmes would be really proud of me right now, especially because I didn't know what idiom means, but deduced. So the phrase's meaning cannot be deduced from the words that are used in the phrase. Let me give you an example. It's raining cats and dogs outside. Imagine 100 years from now, if someone read my journal and they said, it's raining cats and dogs, what was Mark smoking, right? Like, what was he imagining? What was he dreaming up? It's because it's a phrase that has a meaning that if you just take the words on their own, it doesn't mean that. And that's exactly what Jesus is doing. In Jesus's day, to have healthy eyes meant you were focused, you were living intentionally, you looked at the world, you saw the needs that were out there, and you lived accordingly. You were aware of the realities going on, and you gave to the poor because you could see beyond yourself. You could see the realities going on. The opposite is an unhealthy eye, which means you're drawn by the glitter of the world, and you're just constantly like, oh, wow, I just need some of that, and oh, this, and I just really would love to have this, and you don't take care of the poor. You're unaware of all the needs of the community around you. You have an unhealthy eye. And so Jesus was encouraging people to have a healthy eye. With knowing that, can you think of a more timely verse for our Lakeside community? Do you know what our fifth core value is? Everyone can change the world because the future is outside of our walls. We've been given a gift right now, Lakeside. I know it's hard not being together. I love getting the messages and wish we could be with you guys, and we miss you so much too. But Lakeside, this is a gift in this season where we are forced outside of our walls, which is one of our vision statements. It's one of the core values that we have that we want to be. And so here's the thing. Are we going to use this time to get healthy eyes, to gain healthy perspective of what's really going on in the world and be okay with it and be aware of it and respond to the needs around us and gain healthy perspective? Or are we going to have unhealthy eyes? And are we going to binge watch our way through this season and just get out the other side? Are we going to give into the glitter and be totally unaware of what our neighbors need in this time? And then Jesus bottom lines the whole passage. And I love this. He says, no one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. Right? Two masters, maybe a strange language. Two bosses gets the same idea. Nobody loves having two bosses. Some of you are like, yeah, my org chart at work needs to be fixed, but I swear two people think I report to them. And so I'm constantly getting in trouble. Like, why are you doing that? It's like, so-and-so told me, yeah, but you report to me and on, right? Some of you are like, I don't even have a job, but I feel like my parents are like that, right? I'm constantly like, but I was told and dad said this and mom said this and right? Then you bring it up and now they're fighting. It's just a mess. And Jesus is like, doesn't that suck when you have two different people that are in authority over you and they want different things? It's impossible to work with. And so then Jesus then basically uses that analogy and he bottom lines it with this final verse. He says, you can't serve God and money. You can't serve God and money. He doesn't say it's a bad idea to try and serve God and money. He literally says, it's impossible. You can't do it. To which I'm like, what do you mean I can't serve God and money? I don't want to serve God and money. I want to serve God, not money. So what's Jesus talking about? Like, you don't serve money. Money is not your master. But Jesus is so powerful with his words that 2,000 years ago, way before consumeristic culture, Jesus was aware of the fact that even in that culture, money and possessions have the ability to grip our hearts and to demand things from us and to begin to take more and more control over our lives. And we know this. We know the way in which money can grab a hold of the core of our being and reorientate our lives. How many of us can think of someone right now whose life and their relationships were ruined over an argument over money? Because money has the ability to grip our heart, demand things of us, and change the direction and trajectory of our lives. And Jesus is telling us, you must decide who you will serve. You can choose to serve God, and that leads to freedom, because serving God is all about loving God, loving people, serving the world. Or you can choose money as your master. But remember, Money's never satisfied, and it doesn't understand the meaning of the word enough. My pastor used to say all the time, money is a great tool, but it's a lousy master. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, are we going to worship money? And some of you say like worship, like sing to, bow down, kneel before. No, worship simply means to ascribe worth to something. Because if we're going to worship money, it will eat us alive. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for a different way. I'm ready for the unclaimed way. I'm ready for the Jesus way. And so today we're going to talk about simply one of the things that Christians have been practicing for generations. One of the things that Jesus modeled, and many people have referred to it simply as the way of simplicity. And when I say the word simplicity, some of you get uncomfortable and some of you have, flashbacks to childhood and different things. And you kind of imagine poverty. You imagine cinder block, undecorated walls. You imagine your freedom being stripped away. But simplicity's goal is actually the exact opposite. Simplicity is about a simple life. Simplicity, is about freedom. I love the way Joshua Becker actually summarizes the lifestyle of simplicity. He says, simplicity is the intentional promotion of things we value most and the removal of everything that distracts them from us from them. The intentional promotion of things we value most and the removal of everything that distracts us from them. The life of simplicity is one of a decluttered life to free up time so that we are able to truly delight in God, delight in people, and even delight in stuff. The reality is God created a beautiful material world, and we're not meant to run and hide from it. We're actually meant to engage in it, delight in it, but not let it become our masters to the point where we end up serving those things. Simplicity is all about freedom. Simplicity is all about freedom. Not stripping away freedom, giving us freedom. So here's the question that you can simply ask. I'm going to be asking, and as a community, we can be encouraging each other and conversating about to continue to discover the way of simplicity in our lives. What needs to go so that life can grow? What needs to go so that life can grow? What needs to go in your life so that your relational life can grow? So that your spiritual life can grow? So that your physical life can grow? What needs to go in your life so that your creative life can grow? So that your generous life can grow? So that the Jesus life, the unclaimed life, can grow in your life? So that you have more ability to love God, love people, delight in creation, and serve the world that we have been placed in. Imagine if we could free up parts of our life. Imagine the peace that we would have as we connected with God. Imagine the freedom of being able to be intentional with our families. Imagine the delight of the simple things instead of using all of our time and energy to maintain the things that we work so hard to buy in the first place. Imagine what the church would be like if we had freedom in our lives to engage in our fifth core value of changing the world. Think about this, Lakeside. How many times do we tell our children the story of the Good Samaritan, right? The amazing story. This guy, all these people walked by and totally ignored this guy who'd been beaten up and was left on the road for dead. And then the Good Samaritan comes along, picks him up, carries him to an inn, pays for him to be cared for, and says, if there's any more bills, I'll be back later to pay for those as well. And we tell our kids, this is so good, you should be like this. And yet we don't teach them the two principles in life that are so critical to be a good Samaritan. Do you know what he had that many of us don't have? He had extra time and he had extra money. He had margin in his calendar and he had margin in his finances because he had a simplistic model for his life. We won't be able to change the world unless we take hold of the unclaimed life, which is a bit simpler and a bit freer. What needs to go so that life can grow? And some of you, pardon me, in this season, it's not what needs to go so life can grow. It's what is now gone, because some of you, things are being stripped away that you don't want to bring back. What things are being put on pause that you don't even have any control over. And as you're pausing, you're like, I kind of like my life this way. I kind of like not having that class, that subscription, that thing to do, that payment to pay every month. This is actually better. What is actually gone that needs to stay away? But really the question is, what needs to go so life can grow? Can I give you some examples? Can I give you some examples of things you could maybe start trying even in the next few weeks as you're home, not going out as much? Here's some examples as you're reflecting in this season of what can go so life can grow. Number one, simply ask the true cost of something. Okay? Don't just look at the price tag of something. Think about, what's this going to cost me in time? What's this going to cost me in maintenance? What's this going to cost me in my thought pattern? Sometimes I'm buying something and then I'm just realizing, like, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it at night. It's taking up, bandwidth in my mind. So what is the cost of it? And does it make more or less room for me to be able to follow Jesus and follow the Jesus way? Number two, don't impulse buy. Which is kind of cool because some of us are getting practice in that right now, right? I don't know about you, but the moment someone says we need eggs or we're out of milk, I'm like, family trip to Costco, let's go, right? And then all of a sudden I'm going down every aisle and somehow we went to get eggs and we spent $300, right? Don't impulse buy. Don't impulse buy, okay? Think through what you're buying. Number three, okay, and I don't want to be legalistic about this, but limit window shopping, okay? And window shopping could even be classified as going down those aisles that have things that you don't even need. And what do we use the excuse, right? We're like, I just want to see what they have. And I'm kind of like, that's kind of a terrible excuse. I don't know about you, but I'm a married guy. I don't at night just say, babe, I'm just going for a walk just to see the potential in our neighborhood. I'm just having a look. I'm not planning on taking any action towards it, right? How ridiculous is that? And yet we do this all the time with our shopping. And Jesus is like, be careful. Be careful, because possessions have a way of grabbing our heart. And by walking down those aisles or walking into those stores unintentionally, have a very intentional impact on our lives. Number four, discover the beauty of sharing, okay? And I'm so guilty of this, okay? I find a $2 or 2-minute plumbing job and all of a sudden I'm buying a brand new $150 tool because it will make this job easier. Okay. And I've been learning this slowly. And Beth and Dana, I'm almost done with your grinder and your sander. Thank you so much for letting me borrow them for the last few months. But this is something I'm learning, and I'm realizing not only is it beautiful to share and share in community, it actually builds community. Because whenever I go to pick up a tool or borrow a toy or whatever it is, from this neighbor and that neighbor, all of a sudden I'm having a conversation with them in their driveway. And so learn to share instead of own everything. Okay. Number five, rethink, and some of you, this is actually a season where this is actually really helpful. Rethink the amount of work that you take on. Some of you are like, I would just like some work. I've lost my work. I get that. But some of you, this is all of a sudden you're not buying as much. You're not engaged in so many programs. And all of a sudden it's like, why do I have that second job? And why are we both working overtime? And why? And you just, doesn't mean get rid of the job, or maybe it means get rid of the other side hustle that you have, but rethink the amount of work. Because are you just working more to be able to buy more things that you are going to be more hurried to try and engage and delight and enjoy in? Just simplify it. Number six, simplify your possessions. Many of you are already discovering this. It's you don't need to go out and buy new things. So many of you, you've found new toys, new board games in your house in the last few weeks as you've been cooped up, that you just realize you just need to simplify and go for better. Just go for better. Keep the quality things. If you're going to purchase something, buy the quality things that go further. There's a lot that's been written right now in the minimalism thread. I love the way that sometimes Jesus ideas like simplicity start trending. And I'd say the minimalism idea is actually very much the Jesus model. And there's some great literature in the secular world that you can read on this. I love some of the language they use, with simplifying and decluttering your life. Simply ask, is it beautiful? And is it valuable? Those are such Jesus principles, if you're honest. God created the beautiful world. And so it's okay to have things of beauty and have things of value. And you simply say, does this value the things that God values, which is loving God, loving people, and serving the world? Use that as a grid as you declutter your life. And lastly, number 7, cultivate a deep appreciation for creation. Some of us are getting experience and exposure to that right now. And lastly, number 8, learn to delight in the simple things. A good glass of coffee, or a good cup of coffee, a good glass of wine, some good cheese from Tom Cheese Shop. No, that's not a paid advertisement, but I'm just saying. The bottom line is simply this. Do you want more money and more stuff? Or do you want more time and more freedom to step into the life that Jesus offers us? To take hold of the unclaimed life that Jesus has for us? What needs to go so life can grow? Normally, this is where I pause and invite you to invite the Spirit to bring things to mind, but we're not going to do that today. Here's why. I want this to be a conversation that continues on after our live stream ends today. With the people who are around you, maybe friends that you can grab on the phone or on FaceTime. Just be dialoguing in community, because the Spirit uses the Christian community to speak to us, and just simply start saying, like, what needs to go in our life so that we can grow? Start to have this dialogue, and I just want to pray for you as you engage in that. So Holy Spirit, I just pray that you would open up creativity in our homes through technology, around the table, for us to just, through conversation and relationship, would we discover incredible ways that we can simplify our life, not to strip away our freedom, but actually to grow our freedom so that we can take hold of the unclaimed life. Lakeside, I bless you to engage in that healthy conversation. I'm so excited. We're going to put some stuff out on social media this week to start hearing ideas and curating ideas of ways that you're simplifying and getting rid of things so that real life can grow within you and within me. So excited for it, Lakeside. Love you so much. Miss you so much. As has been said already, reach out. We would love to chat with you on the phone. Email us, social media. Our prayer teams are ready. We miss you so much, and we're praying for you. Have a fantastic week, Lakeside.